Tonight on Canton Confidential, it's a name we've heard about for weeks.
Michael Proctor.
Michael Proctor's house?
Trooper Proctor was present.
Trooper Proctor.
Trooper Michael Proctor on the stand today, answering questions about the investigation he led.
Yeah, the right rear taillight had such large pieces missing from it.
And his conduct during it.
Sergeant Mechanic and I never touched any part of that vehicle.
Today, he read out loud and unfiltered texts he wrote about the defendant.
Waiting to lock this whack job up. These juvenile, unprofessional comments have zero impact on the facts and the evidence and the integrity of this investigation.
We're breaking it all down right now on Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.
Well, it was an intense day of testimony today from a witness so many trial watchers have been waiting to hear from. Good evening. I'm Glenn Jones.
I'm J.C. Monahan. State Trooper Michael Proctor is a name that we have heard many times during this trial.
You know that Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor is the lead investigator on this case, correct?
I know that.
I met Proctor January 29th. It's everywhere.
Were you in her house when Jim McKay was interviewed by Michael Proctor?
Her house, yes.
Shortly after you had been interviewed, you called Michael Proctor's personal cell phone number, correct?
I don't remember.
You were a ring bearer in Courtney Proctor's wedding, right?
Correct.
And who's Courtney Proctor's brother?
Michael Proctor.
Proctor is the state police trooper who helped lead the investigation into the death of John O'Keefe. Today, he became the 57th prosecution witness. His testimony was explosive and at times graphic and distasteful, especially as he began reading his text messages about Karen Reed.
Our Kirsten Glavin is live for us in Dedham with some of the biggest moments from today's testimony. Kirsten.
Yeah, this was a critical day in this murder trial with Trooper Michael Proctor testifying to his investigation. Now, we should note that Trooper Proctor is currently under an internal affairs investigation by his own department. And today, jurors got a glimpse as to why. We do want to warn you that some of the language you're about to hear could be considered disturbing.
I recognize that to be the housing unit.
For the first time in the Karen Reed murder trial, Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor taking the stand, showing jurors pieces of evidence he says were collected from Reed's SUV.
It says taillight, one large piece of plastic, color red, one small piece of red plastic.
Trooper Proctor also addressing this video shown last week, capturing Reed backing up into John O'Keefe's vehicle.
We want to at least go document that there was no damage to Mr. O'Keefe's car.
The defense claiming this is how her taillight was damaged, but Proctor disputing that.
There's no red pieces of taillight, which would show up in the contrast of the white snow.
But it was these damning text messages about the case that had Proctor's credibility and integrity in question.
Yep, so these came from me. From all accounts, he didn't do anything wrong. She's a whack job.
Proctor admitting discussing the case with friends, family, and fellow officers.
I text my wife, waiting to lock this whack job up.
Calling Reed profanities, making explicit comments about her appearance, and joking about her medical condition.
No nude so far.
At one point, Proctor texting about looking through Reed's cell phone for nude photos.
I'm going through his client's phone right now, correct?
Yes, after the picture, sir, yes.
Who's the client?
I was referring to Miss Reed.
Proctor again claiming that these were just jokes.
The rest of the unprofessional and regrettable comments are something I'm not proud of.
Outside of court, few words.
Karen, how is it hearing those messages?
I'd like the state police to say something about the language they've heard.
And I did reach out to Massachusetts State Police about the conduct that you heard in some of those text messages. We are still waiting to hear back from them. Glenn, JC.
All right, Kirsten, it'll be very interesting to hear what they have to say. All right, if there's any night we needed two legal analysts, this is the night. We're joined now by Michael Coyne, Dean at the Massachusetts School of Law, and local attorney Catherine Luftus, who you'll find on TikTok at Note My Objection.
All right, well, we heard it. We don't have to discuss just how horrendous some of the things that were said in those texts were. But up to this point, we're now in week 6. We have said Trooper Proctor's name has been out there this whole time, and I think you both were on the same page that the prosecution had to get ahead of it and call him to the stand despite the possibility that he was a liability. Feel the same way today?
Yeah, correct. I think the judge probably told them that if they didn't call him, she would give what's known as the missing witness instruction, meaning that you can assume that his testimony would be adverse to the Commonwealth. So with that in mind, they had no choice but to call him.
Wow.
You concur?
I do, and I think for a bit I was thinking about, well, maybe they'll let the defense call him and ask direct questions, but after hearing what came out today, what they would have done if he was on direct is just had him read the text. So what did you say next, and what was your response, which I think would have been worse. Ultimately, he had to be called. He's been talked about for weeks and weeks on end, and the Commonwealth, I do feel I have some sympathy for the prosecutor, because you get handed the case you get handed, and this is the lead investigator, and to have to put him on and to essentially get ahead of these texts that are going to come out through Cross is pretty tough.
And I wonder to what extent perhaps Trooper Proctor has contaminated other law enforcement officials. We know that his superiors were in this text exchange, and it doesn't seem as if they reprimanded him in any other way. I mean, does the jury now think about, well, we need to send a message here that this is not okay?
I'm not even sure they have to send a message. I think the testimony likely was fatal to the government's case, and especially as you point out that his supervisors were involved in this exchange, didn't reprimand him in any way, didn't even stop the conversation from continuing. The fact is it does taint all of law enforcement in this case, and a lot of law enforcement hasn't covered themselves in glory already. So I'm afraid that this has put the Commonwealth in likely a very fatal position.
And Catherine, just one point for you, because the jury doesn't necessarily know that Proctor is under an internal investigation, which seems like the right proper step in order to figure out whether he should be reprimanded.
That's correct, and I thought it was interesting. So that was ruled upon pre-trial by the judge that information wasn't going to come in. We don't know whether it's closed. We don't know whether it's ongoing. He did say that he was still working for the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office in the CPAC unit. So to me, that leads maybe to believe that the IA investigation is over. It was, I don't know what conclusion they could have come to based on this, but it's interesting if we'll ever hear about what the actual results of that investigation was.
Do you like the tactic of just going right after those texts to try to discredit him versus all the other things that have been alluded to that he engaged in? In other words, the defense's side is that he tampered with all the evidence. We haven't even touched that yet.
In only a half hour of cross-examination, what are we talking about tonight? The jury has tomorrow off. They have a day to let it sit and resonate with them. They don't come back till Wednesday. I think he hit the grand slam as he started out his cross-examination, and that was his intent. That type of language in a courtroom is always shocking. The fact that it would be the lead investigator using this type of language about the accused, her attorney, and all of this, I think is just horrific. And I feel for the O'Keefe family.
Yes, without a doubt. And just a reminder, in case you didn't see the trial today, those text exchanges, there was one with a group of his lifelong buddies, but the other text thread, as we said, were with, I believe, 5 other officers, 2 of whom were his superior.
That's right, yeah. And Catherine, I wonder if you're a defense attorney who has Trooper Proctor working on a case that your client is the subject of, what do you do with this information?
Well, it's interesting because he's actually one of the lead investigators on the Brian Walsh case, which will be coming up out of it's Cohasset. So it has much broader implications moving forward. Essentially, it taints him permanently. Wow.
Yeah. All right, well, this is obviously not going to be the end of this discussion.
No, in fact, don't go anywhere. Our coverage on Proctor's testimony continues ahead.
Joining us in studio is courtroom insider Sue O'Connell to break down the jury's reaction to the testimony they heard from Proctor. We'll be right back.
Sir, this is a citizen. She's a woman. You were supposed to be objectively investigating. You weren't so much as objectively investigating her as objectifying her in those moments, correct?
Again, Mr. Jackson, it was a poor choice of words and a joke.
Some truly explosive moments as Trooper Michael Proctor was grilled on cross-examination this afternoon. Proctor read off texts from a group chat between he and other police investigators. Many of the texts involved offensive and topics referring to Karen Read in an inappropriate way. Comments even Proctor admits were unprofessional. We're joined now by Sue O'Connell, who was in the courtroom today and can kind of provide some context for us.
Because what I think a lot of us want to know is, how did the jury take that in, to hear texts read out loud when they have those kind of words in them?
Yeah, it was compelling. I mean, first of all, remember Lally brought them up first, and Proctor read them first with Lally. We could barely hear Proctor, right? And the judge kept asking Proctor to speak up. We could barely hear him. So some of these words weren't getting by. All the jurors were leaning forward, trying to hear him and trying to understand what that was saying. But it all came into very sharp focus, obviously, when Alan Jackson got up and started repeating the things and having him read the things that maybe people missed the first time. We all, in the press pool, we were all trying to share to see what we were hearing. The jury is majority female, and they range from age, I think, of about 25 to maybe 65. And to watch some of them who have not had a lot of facial expressions about what's happening in the courtroom suddenly have expressions. One woman had her mouth open. One woman had her hand over her mouth and was watching. One woman who doesn't often look at the witnesses leaned in and looked at him like this. One woman looked back and looked at every single female juror she could look at to make eye contact with. Now, I'm leaving the men out because I wasn't necessarily paying attention to them, because suddenly the coalition of women on the jury were reacting to this language, to these words, and at one point they were just shaking their head. One woman laughed that this was just, I have to guess, an outrageous laugh reaction.
Absurd. Like one of those.
Yes, like
absurd.
Yes.
You know, you have been very careful about not becoming too immersed in this case before you heard what happened in the courtroom. So you had heard the name Michael Proctor mentioned many times. How did his testimony match up to your expectations?
Well, it's one thing to read or hear in an opening statement what the words are going to be, and then it's another to see a state trooper sitting on a witness stand saying that he sent these texts to his superiors and to a group. So it was really striking. He looked like a beaten down man. I mean, he sat on that witness stand and had his head down during the sidebars that were happening. His energy level couldn't have been lower. It was like a dead man walking sort of moment where he was just up there and resigned to what happened. I was shocked by the content of the text messages. Again, I didn't do a deep dive. I didn't know what they all said, but they made fun of just about every aspect of Karen's life as a person who has a chronic illness, as a woman. It made fun of people who have disabilities all across the board, and used language in such a graphic way to describe a human being. And objectified doesn't even go nearly far enough. So regardless of what you think she did or she didn't do, to have the law of our state, law officers of our state, having this discussion was really, really shocking.
I would assume at this point, I shouldn't even need to ask this, there really was nothing he could do on that stand that could undo the damage.
I think on one hand, he was sorry. He kept expressing regret. He said they were, poorly chosen words, which I think it's more than that. But also when Alan Jackson said, you made fun of my partner Yannetti right here. He's sitting right here. Do you want to take back some of the words you said about him? And he found it in him to say, no, I still don't like him, which was one of those moments where I saw one juror go, no, you're still that guy. Right? He could have just said, I regret those words as well, but he couldn't let that go. And I think in some ways that might have done some damage in a way that he didn't expect it to, because one person was just like, you're kidding me. You're still going to take a shot at Yannetti after all of this that we're listening to.
Clearly the most consequential witness so far, Sue.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, Sue O'Connell, thank you.
And we're not done. You may have heard us talk about it once before during this trial. Rule 14. What exactly is it, and why is it being brought back up?
Sue O'Connell will be back, as well as our legal expert, Michael Coyne, to dig into that.
Welcome back. Trial usually begins 9:15, so maybe you missed it because there was a fiery hearing before the start of testimony today.
Yeah, the prosecution has filed a motion seeking to force the defense to provide more information on some of their upcoming expert witnesses and to exclude one defense witness altogether. Judge Beverly Cannoni held a brief hearing on it this morning. The defense is looking to call an ER doc, who is also a pathologist, to testify about the possibility that injuries to John O'Keefe's arm might have been caused by a dog. The prosecution says the expert witness should not be allowed to testify, saying it's bad faith to introduce the witness so late in the process. They don't have time to prepare. Karen Reed's lawyer, David Yannetti, and the judge had a tense exchange over this.
Can you imagine the nerve of the Commonwealth to spend that interaction?
This is the hyperbole I don't need. Could you please get to the point? We've got a jury coming in 15 minutes.
I understand, but this is my integrity has been attacked. There have been allegations of bad faith that has been attacked, and I need to defend myself and my client. We were only discussing at that time whether canine DNA was still outstanding, and I succinctly replied, no. And they've spun that, or tried to spin that, into a claim that we're somehow waiving our right to argue that John O'Keefe's arm injuries were consistent with a dog attack. And I ask you, have they no shame? I'm sure it's not lost on this court that this false filing by the Commonwealth comes on the heels of their nefarious attempt to pass off an inverted video, a false video, before this good jury hearing this case. Never once during the direct examination of Sergeant Buchanan did they inquire or mention the fact that the video...
The judge did not exclude that expert witness, but said she wants that witness on the stand without jurors to determine whether the testimony would be allowed in front of the jury. That hearing is expected to last 1/2 day.
All right, so we're joined by Michael Coyne, Sue O'Connell again. Starting with Michael, this was all under the umbrella of what they called Rule 14. Could you explain what that is?
Catherine and I were just talking about it. What it really deals with is the expert testimony and their qualifications. And lawyers a lot of times will hire experts to testify. But at the same point, then, there are disclosure requirements with respect to providing the other side reports and the basis for the testimony so that they can be prepared for cross-examination. And none of that has been done yet. In fact, Attorney Yannetti said that they haven't even talked to the experts, which is quite unusual if, in fact, that's the case. But they're saying that there is a confidentiality order issued from the federal court that would preclude them from doing so. But it would be extraordinarily unusual for a lawyer to put witnesses on the stand, expert witnesses on the stand, without having access to any of the underlying information, or especially not having had a significant conversation with them, not just a brief conversation.
Sue, in the little time we have left, did this hearing reveal a sour relationship between Attorney Yannetti and Judge Cannoni?
It may have, but I think she has just been very impatient, and she just wanted to have this quickly to get the jurors into the jury box and just have him tell her what his case was. So I think that's what she was really getting to, because she is now getting really mama bear about the jurors and how long it's taking, where they are, what their expectations are, trying to get them out of the room if she doesn't need them there to hear stuff. So I think that might have been more about being protective about them.
Okay.
All right, stay right there. We're going to be right back.
Attorney Catherine Loftus is back with us. Note my objection on TikTok.
Catherine, we did hear from another police officer. It wasn't just Proctor today. It was Sergeant Nicholas Barrows. He's of the Dighton Police. He was only asked a few questions. One of them was about Karen Reed's taillight before it was towed from Dighton back to Canton. Take a listen.
I saw that there was some damage to the right rear taillight. To my best ability and recollection, that tail light was not completely damaged. It was cracked, and a piece was missing, but not completely damaged.
Did not cross-examine Sergeant Barrows. So we ended up getting this question from one of our viewers, Michael. Michael asked, did the defense just lose a huge opportunity?
I actually don't think that they did. I thought it was strategic that they didn't ask the questions. The Commonwealth got out that there was a crack and a piece missing. Instantly, my followers, when I'm streaming, were asking, how big is the piece? Is it this big? Is it this small? So I think that because the Commonwealth didn't get out what size it was and therefore how many pieces it could have been cracked into, the defense just left it, and therefore then they can potentially argue it was just one piece. The Dighton officer who saw it in Karen Reed's drive driveway. He only saw a crack. He didn't see the entire thing missing. He didn't see multiple pieces missing. So I think the inference that they'll likely try to argue, maybe in a closing statement, is that, in fact, it wasn't all gone.
So less is more.
Less is more. Sometimes
if
it's not going to gain you anything, because if they had followed up and asked that question, he could have said, oh, the piece was huge, which actually hurts their case. So sometimes if you don't need to ask a question, you just let it be.
And in this case, it is a witness who is outside the town of Canton, and we haven't seen that very much.
That's right. We've really only seen Canton Police, State Police, State Crime Lab. So I think this witness is probably a little more inherently reliable because he really doesn't have any stake in the game. He was just called, helped respond. So his credibility is up.
All right, a reminder, if you have a question for one of our experts, send us an email at canton.confidential@nbcuni.com.
No court tomorrow. We hope to see you back here tomorrow.